Welcome boys and girls, Questine here with my Immortal Empires race tier list for Total War Warhammer 3, patch 7.0 following the release of the Tides of Torment DLC. It is worth looking at the various races in the game and their rankings to see how they're doing right now. I do expect certain fundamental changes with the release of the Lords of the End Times DLC for the game because of the cataclysmic events that Creative Assembly is going to add in the game. But it remains to be seen how they're going to do that. Anyway, starting with the Beastmen, I would say the Beastmen are a D tier race. Not a bad race, for the record. They are strong in what they are. So if you're looking to play a campaign where you're just purely focusing on battles and don't have to deal with an economy as much and certainly don't have to deal with diplomacy, fair enough. From my perspective, I don't think Beastmen are a great race. Because of their limitations on diplomacy, because they don't have to deal with settlements, because they don't have to deal with economy, really, except dread, if you consider that an economy, and even from their military perspective, I would say what drags the Beastmen down is the fact that they have unit caps. So if you are looking at a race that you want to play and focus on purely the military aspect, I don't think the Beastmen do an especially great job in that angle either, or from that perspective either, because the unit caps limit how many fun and interesting units you can use for a good portion of the campaign. The power is there, you can ambush your way to victory, really, but I don't think they're really a great race at the moment to play. Not bad, just not really great. Then we have Bretonnia, F tier, without any kind of doubt in my mind. Bretonnia is an outdated race, and they've been an outdated race for a while, and they're certainly showing their age, be it confederations, the research tree, Bretonnia itself, in terms of how it's designed on the campaign map, legendary lords, legendary lord campaigns. Bretonnia does desperately need an update, a rework, a DLC, even if it's a free DLC, but they do need something. Now, given what Creative Assembly has stated in the past, they're not going to do a paid DLC for Bretonnia. They're going to do free content. Now, they did add Rapance back in Warhammer 2, but they need to do something similar to that in Warhammer 3, and maybe even more. Like, I would like a Bretonnian DLC, for the record. I wouldn't be against it, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Then we have the Dwarves. Dwarves are an A-tier race. They have really powerful armies of range units, melee infantry, monsters. They have an interesting resource system. The only thing that prevents the Dwarves from being an S-tier race, or rather the only things that prevent the Dwarves from being an S-tier race, have to do with one, Zaytan's campaign, so only 2 out of 3 campaigns are really good. That's Drazif and Astragoth. And then on top of that, it has to do with the game pacing, because Dwarves start really slow and then build up to being unstoppable. You're just playing a campaign where you start in a pretty decent position, but you can't really unlock those awesome units to use until later on, and when you do, you're just not really able to utilize them. There's nothing that can stand in your path. So good race, undeniably so, and a very popular race, but I do think some of the pacing issues of the game could be improved on. Then we have the Demon Prince. Do I even need to mention what I think about Daniel in the game? Daniel is a marketing name Creative Assembly invented, by the way. Yeah, Daniel is not even on this list. He doesn't deserve a spot on this list. So yes, he's F tier minus 100. That would be my perspective. Then we have the Dark Elves. S tier race, especially with low cure. But even without low cure, they have instant construction. They have a good variety of units, heroes, and lords. Even if those lords could use some improvements, they do have a variety of campaigns. They do have a lot of possibilities and options in terms of diplomacy on the campaign map. They have a good economy. If there is any issue with the Dark Elves, it's more of a long-term issue in their campaign, because their endgame units aren't necessarily the best and worth investing in. But compared to many other races, which may have a couple of units they can use early on, Dark Elves have a good amount, great hero variety, even pretty decent lord variety, even if, yeah, Dreadlords are just flat out better than Supreme Sorceresses and Beastmasters. Then we have the Dwarves, the best race in the game, even after the release of the Tides of Torment DLC. The Dwarves, following the release of Thrones of Decay, have gone from being one of the more annoying races to play, so to speak, to being the best. Long-term objectives, medium-term objectives, short-term objectives, a great variety of heroes, units, Legendary Lord, Confederation of Legendary Lords. Like, Dwarves were the race where Creative Assembly really delivered with the release of the Tides of Thrones of Decay DLC. I wish they had kept that going. Unfortunately, they didn't. Then we have Cathay. I'm going to put Cathay right in the middle. So, on one hand, Cathay does have a good variety of units, but their campaigns just kind of feel samey. So, regardless of whether or not you're playing Miao Ying, Xiao Ming, or Yan Bo, all of their campaigns end up feeling very samey, similar. And then you add in the fact that you have no way of improving casualty replenishment, and you can just win the campaign very quickly in the short term with just Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen. All that variety gets wasted with Cathay. And yeah, it's at least Chaos Dwarves have some really, really awesome stuff they unlock. Cathay doesn't quite go there. Their research tree, their harmony system, the design of their campaigns do leave a lot to be desired. Great for a short campaign, absolutely, but not so much in terms of replayability in long campaigns. Then we have Greenskins. I would say Greenskins, it's an interesting one to think about. I think Greenskins are an A-tier race, like kind of close to B. I would be tempted to put them in B. Maybe I will eventually towards the end of this video. But the thing about Greenskins, they work very well within the context of Warhammer free campaigns. They're very aggressive. They're very good at dealing with various things. They do have limitations in terms of trade and diplomacy. Fair enough. But when you look at Skarsnik, when you look at Grimgor, when you look at Warzag, those are some great campaigns, and they all play very differently from one another. Hell, even Azag, which a lot of people feel abandoned, even Azag has a good amount of potential because, hilariously enough, with Azag, he can ally Kislev and the Vampire Counts and then just ravage an Empire because why not, right? It's kind of hilarious to think about. Then we have High Elves. I would say High Elves are an A-tier race. I've always had the opinion that High Elves have always been a good race in the game. Powerful baseline roster, powerful heroes, powerful lords. They just don't play as well as they should given the dynamics of Warhammer free campaign. So it's a question of pacing, how certain things are locked. They have improved things with the Tides of Torment DLC, but I don't think they've improved enough for them to be an S-tier race. Then we get Khorne. So Khorne, I would say, is an S-tier race. The reason I would argue Khorne is an S-tier race is because when you look at Khorne, yes, they focus on battle, but then they have a lot of campaign mobility with cults. Then they have all those objectives with Arbol, for instance, and I think Arbol is the campaign I'm really judging Khorne by because it is the best by far. But even if you're playing Scarbrand or Skulltaker if you want, it's still a great dynamic that plays well within the context of Warhammer 3. Great unit variety, reasons to use that unit variety, especially with mortal units, really powerful legendary lords, and they just work. Maybe they're faster than some people would want them to be, but I think Khorne just really delivers. And it's the kind of campaign where, yeah, you can play it slow and you can take your time and steamroll everything, or you can just throw yourself against really powerful foes knowing that you can win. So that is what I think makes Khorne a good race to play. Then we have Kislev. So Kislev, with regards to Kislev, I think I'm going to say, I'm actually going to move the Greenskins to B tier at this point, actually. So with regards to, because I think Kislev is better than the Greenskins, and I think it, you know, it was already sketchy putting it on the same tier as Chaos Dwarves, and now with Kislev, yeah, very different discussion. So with Kislev, they do have a great variety of units. They do have a good amount of campaign power. They do negate climate. They finally feel as Kislev should feel after their rework earlier this year, which is to fight Chaos, be the Shield of North. They have incentives to do so. But when you look at their campaigns, I mean, Katrin and Kastaltin are fine, but not great. Boris Ursus is amazing. Astanka is whatever. So I think Kislev as a race is pretty good. I do think they get left behind a bit by the design of Kislev as a campaign area, but we'll say pretty good race, all things considered. Then we have the Lizardmen. I'm going to say it flat out. I am not impressed by what Creative Assembly has done with the Lizardmen rework. I think they could have fixed more. They did improve them. So they've gone from F tier to being D, but Lizardmen suffer because of the jungle. They should be the masters of the jungle, and they're just like anyone else. In fact, they're actually some of the worst to deal with the jungle because of the way their economy works, their campaign structure works. Skaven and Dwarves, hilariously enough, and Ogres and Chaos Dwarves all do better in a jungle campaign than the natural beings of the jungle. So yeah, that is a pretty sad state of affairs, I gotta say. Then we have Norsca. Norsca, I think, is a B tier race as well. I wish I could say they're better, because, like, yeah, Trog, definitely an S tier campaign. Wulfric, not so much. Sail, certainly not. And Norsca suffers from the perspective that while Trog does a lot to improve the race that he's playing on, I don't think you can judge a race by just one campaign. Like, certainly I'm not judging Khorne by just, like, Arbol, even though Arbol is the best. Like, Arbol just takes everything that's good about Khorne and improves it, so does Trog. But Norsca still holds Trog back in some very substantial ways. It's a question of hero capacity, it's the question of 2 out of 3 campaigns not being that great, which, yeah, say what you will about Scarbrand, he's a good campaign at the moment. Wulfric, he's okay. Sail, not so much, and I think that the dynamics, and the bugs, I should add, do drag Norsca down. They're not too far away from being improved in such a way that they could flat out go to an S tier race, or at least an A tier, but I just don't think they're there. Then we have Nurgle. So Nurgle is, I'm going to say it flat out, I am not impressed by Nurgle. If you're looking for a plague campaign, Festus is right there, and he's better at plagues. If you're looking for a hero-based campaign, yes, you do have Tamarkan, and he's amazing from a chieftain perspective, but he suffers from the pacing issue. If you're looking from a unit perspective, again, Festus is still there. If you want the entire cast unit roster of Nurgle, you can get it for Festus, and you'll probably have a much better campaign dynamic playing as Festus than you would as any of the Nurgle campaigns, including Tamarkan. Though Tamarkan, yeah, he would elevate it to a B tier, but still, I think Nurgle just... They could have done better, they didn't. Then we have Ogres. Good question on Ogres. I think I'm going to give them an A tier. I am tempted to give them S tier, but the thing about Ogres is they have a great unit roster. Their campaigns are good. Yes, even Man-Eater. But I think Ogres just end up in that situation where you have an early game challenge, and it's not really a challenge because Ogre Bolts just dominate most things early on, and then later on, once you unlock all the cool shit, and you can pretty quickly, it's like, okay, I'm just steamrolling, nothing else to see on that. I think it's a good campaign for what it's supposed to be, but it's also a bit annoying, and you never have the same kind of dynamics as you would even in a Khorne campaign. Like, if you want to look at a campaign where you have a powerful army and great unit variety, Khorne does that. Melee focused, and you don't have the same annoyances as Ogres, because dealing with the camps and the meat can be a bit annoying, and you always have some level of risk with Khorne, because with Ogres, you're going to lose a lot of shit and then rebuild it instantly. With Khorne, you lose an army, with bloodletting, you're going to feel that. So I think that's the dynamic that's really missing from an Ogre campaign. Also, once you do a couple of contracts and bounties as anyone, contracts as Man-Eater, you're just nigh on unstoppable. Then we have Skaven. So with Skaven, I would say Skaven are one of the more interesting races. They're a specialized race, undeniably so, in the context of a Warhammer free campaign because of the way they take settlements. But their campaigns can be very dynamic, especially quick. But so can Ikeclaw and Fraught once they get past their initial starting positions, hell, even Tretch. You do have those choices, you do have a wide variety of units to pick from, you do have a wide variety of playstyles to go for, or hell, you could even play a Diplomatic Skaven if you want to. Sure, no one's gonna trust you, so you'll have to keep earning that diplomacy, but it is an interesting mix of managing things. The one reason I would not put Skaven in S tier is because, yes, Ikeclaw, Fraught, do suffer from the initial starting situations. Like, that's more of an Estalian, Tylean, and Kislev design issue than any campaign issue. Play Ikiclaw in the Old World campaign, you'll see what he can actually do, not the limited, lesser version of him that we have right now. Slaanesh, I'm gonna say Slaanesh is a C tier. I mean, really, at least they can recruit units normally, unlike Nurgle, and they don't suffer from being surrounded by mountains and having mountains not as a suitable climate. So Slaanesh does do a pretty okay job. In fact, they can dominate the campaign, but it's just spamming Chaos Warriors of Slaanesh and just dominating with that and mass heroes without the drawbacks that you might have about losing an army as Khorne doesn't feel that exciting. I mean, Slaaneshi campaigns can be interesting early on, but then they lose their luster very, very quickly. That is where I stand on that subject. Then we have the Empire. Yeah, Empire is S tier. They could use improvements in terms of their unit roster, specifically their melee infantry, but when you look at Karl's campaign, Gelt's campaign, even Elspeth's campaign, sure, there's a lot of power, maybe a bit too much compared to the foes you're dealing with, because you do need powerful foes to actually challenge yourself, but Empire campaigns can be dynamic, especially Karl France, hell, even Elspeth and Gelt. You do have those choices, you do have that variety, it can be interesting, and again, between the choices of units, heroes, lords, legendary lords, research choices, it can be a very fun situation. I would strongly recommend playing the Empire at the moment, especially Karl France, but again, Gelt and Elspeth are not bad. It's just Karl is better. That's kind of the hilarious part about that. Then we have the Tomb Kings. Yeah, I'm going to say the Tomb Kings are D tier. They're not F. I'm tempted to put them in F, but they've been improved a bit. Not as much. It's kind of like just, polishing something that requires a complete overhaul, and that's exactly what Creative Assembly has done with the Tomb Kings. Could have been better, should have been better. I think the Book of Nagash system, no, I'm actually going to go here and say that, yeah, Tomb Kings are fucking F tier. Like, when I remember, like, if we're just talking about the racial mechanics, okay, fair enough, they would deserve higher, but then you add in the Books of Nagash and that entire fucking system and the way that system still works, yeah, easy F tier. Easy F tier. It's just that level, that constant level of frustration, those limited armies, having to chase down books, which are always randomized from the beginning of a campaign. It's like, great job on fixing very little with them. They fix some things, but the priorities of Tomb Kings that they should have worked on were not those. So yeah, I do think they could have done a better job with the Tomb Kings, and they didn't. Then we have Tzeentch. Yeah, I'm not even going to argue about this. Tzeentch is F tier. Like, Kairos doesn't have a great campaign, and the Changeling is the single worst campaign that Creative Assembly has ever designed in the history of the game. Undeniably so. Then we have Vampire Counts. Interesting. So Vampire Counts, I think, even though they have never really gotten a rework, except getting a couple of things with the release of the Vampire Coast, I think Vampire Counts work pretty well within the current system of the game. That's not to say they're one of the best races, but you play Vlad, you play Isabella, you play Kemler even. They're pretty good campaigns, all things considered, in the context of the game. From a diplomatic standpoint, from a campaign pacing standpoint, it forces you to make choices. Like, it's interesting to think about the Vampire Counts because they're one of the very few races that has never really gotten proper DLC, unless you count Grim the Grave, and I don't, for the record. But they still work well within the context of the game. So I think, like, from the perspective of, like, their history and the fact that they have never gotten that kind of proper update, you could even argue they're an S tier. What isn't an S tier are Vampire Coast. Easily the single worst race, one of the worst races in the game as a whole. Their army doesn't work, their campaign dynamics doesn't work. Any SC-based attacks have improved their campaign situation, undeniably so, but you don't win prizes by taking a mechanic that works better on Lokir, Aislinn, and Wulfric and using it as a race. That's not an improvement. That's like saying Bretonnia is a better race because Alberic got sea-based attacks. That is not an improvement. That's just like polishing something. So yeah, no, Vampire Coast is still a terrible race to play, and I don't think that they deserve any better. And as for Warriors of Chaos and Wood Elves. I'm just gonna move Carl down a bit. Apologies, that was... Come on, game. As for Warriors of Chaos and Wood Elves, I'll be blunt. I think, like, when you're looking at Warriors of Chaos, let's say Warriors of Chaos are C tier. They're a very strong race, but the only campaign that's really worth playing is Be'lakor or Festus if you're looking to play a proper Nurgle campaign. Previously, I would have said that they're F tier, really, but yeah, they got some things that work at least. I wouldn't recommend playing Warriors of Chaos. I think they reward a playstyle which is against how a campaign should play in the game. And this is the same with Nakari, by the way. This is the same to a degree with Cathay. It's what are you encouraging the player to do? What is the incentive structure that exists for a player when they're playing a Warriors of Chaos campaign? Powerful roster, but limited armies, abusing diplomacy, and you inherently abuse diplomacy as Warriors of Chaos. It's not like, oh, I can cheese. No, you do cheese. Like, you abuse the vassal system, because Creative Assembly couldn't improve that. And then we get into Wood Elves. I'm tempted to put them in F tier, but F tier is just for races that flat out don't work. Wood Elves do work exceptionally well. Undeniably so. But they, again, just inherently abuse campaign dynamics. For them, it's like just gaining vision with actions and teleporting around the world around trees and having those trees never being threatened because no one's attacking them. Like, if you have an army in a tree or you just have a tree, it's like very few chances anyone attacks any of the Wood Elven tree Salamans once you get to the, like, tier 3, and it's pretty easy. You're not even limited by growth in that. Your structures, like, it's just that combination of, like, a lot of power, but then it's like, take it slow, boys. That's gonna stop you. It doesn't, by the way. Just look at Orion's campaign. Anyway, that would be all I had to say. Questine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you boys next time.